Hi everyone, I'm David Vaucher. Welcome to Return on Racing. Return on Racing is powered by Vaucher Analytics, which helps race teams and drivers drive efficiencies off track so they can fuel success on track. Return on Racing is also brought to you by the Motorsport Sponsorship Accelerator, the most cutting edge resource out there to learn how to find, maintain, and grow long-term sponsorship relationships. If you're interested in finding out more, please visit the Vaucher Analytics website at www.vaucheranalytics.com and use the navigation links at the top right-hand screen. Okay, so today, big day on Return on Racing. This is actually the start of the 4th season of the show. It's kind of amazing that I've come so far, and I really appreciate you all coming on the journey with me. Somewhat ironically, I want to mark the start of this 4th season with the end of another one, and those are going to be the WEC and IMSA. A couple months ago, or in fact, maybe just about 2 months ago now, I started a series called the Vaucher Analytics State of Motorsport 2025, where the idea was to take a look back at what happened in a previous series of a large and important motorsports league, and then perhaps more importantly, set the scene for what I think might happen in 2026 and beyond. I started that series with IndyCar, and I'm going to link that in the show notes. And today I'm going to get to the next series that have just wrapped up, and those are the WEC and IMSA. So let's just get right into it. Endurance racing doesn't dominate global motorsport conversation the way Formula One does. But in 2025, it nevertheless delivered impressive results. Sustained organic growth across multiple continents and 2 major rulebooks. Indeed, although the WEC and IMSA now operate within a broadly shared prototype ecosystem, they're still distinct products with different audiences, commercial structures, and internal priorities. Nevertheless, their successes were shared and come from a phenomenal on-track product showcasing multi-class action, manufacturer storytelling, and the kind of racing that purists and increasingly new fans swear by. And crucially, unlike some other series, the WEC and IMSA genuinely seem to understand what they are and how they appeal to people. But beneath that success, I observed 3 separate fault lines beginning to emerge in 2025. Each one matters not because endurance racing is struggling, objectively it isn't, but because the future depends on navigating these issues without breaking the momentum the sport has finally built. Keeping in mind the fully granular breakdown would require an analysis for both the WEC and IMSA. For the sake of clarity, I'm just treating them together here. And in fact, they do share the key areas to watch in 2026, which are safety, technical agreements, and commercial prospects. If you find yourself asking why I'm bringing up safety in 2025, I wouldn't blame you. Safety in motorsport has absolutely grown in leaps and bounds, but I'm referring to a very specific type of safety, and that is safety of a crowd. Track and car safety have come a long way since the earliest days of motorsport. But after attending the WEC's 6 Hours of Spa in 2025, I'm not certain that crowd safety has followed suit, or at least the emphasis on crowd safety has followed suit. Now, this is not an endurance racing specific problem. I want to pause here and say that whereas the 6 Hours of Spa got about 100,000 attendees, the F1 race in the same year at Spa was just under 400,000. So crowd safety, as I noticed it at Spa, is absolutely an issue to watch for races that are even more well attended. So it's not specific to endurance racing. But with crowds growing at many motorsport events, and importantly, with demand increasing to physically constrained areas such as the paddock and the pit, it is crucial that all series, including the WEC and IMSA, have mechanisms in place to study crowd mitigation on an ongoing basis, as well as enforce existing laws and guidelines, because unfortunately, those are based on past tragedies. I wrote an article on my experience with crowd safety right after I returned from the 6 Hours of Spa. I will link that in the show notes, and I'd be really curious to hear from any of you out there listening, whether you've had similar experiences and what your thoughts are on the current state of crowd safety within motorsports. I want to shift gears now to a more commercial topic and quantify the success that endurance racing has had in 2025, because there have been noticeable changes in the metrics that matter. It is undeniable that IMSA and the WEC are riding a wave of unprecedented popularity, most likely fueled by a mix of spillover from F1 fans looking for even more racing action, as well as people drawn directly to top-class prototype competition. The numbers just don't lie. 3 of the first 4 IMSA events of the 2025 season set all-time attendance records. In 2025, IMSA's YouTube channel hit the 1 million subscriber milestone. As I said earlier, nearly 100,000 people attended the WEC 6 Hours of Spa, and this was up from under 90,000 just a year prior in 2024. Finally, one last stat for you. The 24 Hours of Le Mans Grid in 2025 featured 62 cars across the Hypercar, LMP2, and LMGT3 categories, with many of the automotive industry's biggest names represented. This is the blue skies moment that every racing series dreams of. Both momentum alone isn't enough. It has to be supported by stable regulations, sustainable costs, satisfied manufacturers, and a product that remains compelling even when the competitive balance shifts. So I want to talk now, shifting gears from this top-level success to really the nuts and bolts of what make a series work and how those need to be managed to keep momentum going in a series. Specifically, there's two certainties in racing. Lap times will fall and costs will rise. Costs in racing will go up, that is certain, that's always been the case. So it's key for organizers to set up structures to mitigate those cost increases. Motorsport history is filled with examples of series that could not go the distance, usually because spiraling costs push teams out and discourage new organizations from replacing them. The current hypercar regulations were created in response to the unsustainable cost escalation of the LMP1 era. In 2018, the target for a two-car WEC season under the new hypercar rules was at the time 20 million euros, and even 8 years later, with quite a bit of inflation added onto that. The price tag, which I've heard is anywhere from 40 to 50 million euros per season for a two-car campaign, it looks like a fair ask compared to F1's cost cap, which is going to be over 200 million euros. Despite a few withdrawals, Glickenhaus, Asada Fraschini, Lamborghini's limited presence with the SC63, and Porsche's exit, which we'll absolutely return to shortly, the grid remains remarkably healthy. The 2026 WEC and IMSA schedules look nearly identical to 2025's, which signals that both series understand how important predictable costs and calendar stability are. It says a lot to me that Peugeot, whose parent company Stellantis is facing its own difficulties, not only remains in the WEC, but has plans for a successor to the 9X8. Though neither series can control what teams pay for equipment or personnel, it's encouraging to see them control what they can. And the arrival of Genesis, Ford, and McLaren in Hypercar is a testament that the investment case still makes sense. So now I want to focus on this Porsche exit and specifically the diverging paths of two extremely well-known and quite frankly key brands in endurance racing. So Ford versus Ferrari may be Hollywood's favorite rivalry, but the real one, the one that you can trace across time, and perhaps the one that people might most think of when they pit one brand against another, is Porsche versus Ferrari. And that rivalry played out and is now playing out in opposite directions across the WEC and IMSA. Ferrari opened the 2025 WEC season with an utterly dominant run, a 1-2-3 in Qatar, and victories in every race in the first half of the season, including a third consecutive Le Mans win. Unsurprisingly, this spiked renewed fan concern about balance of performance, or BOP, an ongoing backdrop to any modern endurance racing discussion. Meanwhile, Porsche, the 2024 WEC Drivers' Champions, struggled in 2025, even as they thrived in IMSA. Porsche won the first 4 IMSA races, took the team's championship, and saw Matt Campbell and Mathieu Jaminet crowned Drivers' Champions. Now, this divergence in performance for Porsche between the WEC and IMSA would typically be chalked up to the normal ebb and flow of motorsport or sport generally. It's the old saying, you win some, you lose some. But this didn't end normally. Porsche announced it was leaving the WEC. Ferrari had both racing success and commercial momentum, and I mean commercial in the consumer-facing sense. Porsche had very little, maybe not enough, maybe none, in some cases, if we're talking commercial, of either, of racing success and commercial momentum. Porsche's decision was as nuanced as the factors contributing to it, because they didn't exit endurance racing entirely. Rather, they chose to leave the WEC but remain in IMSA, a move that reflects commercial strategy as much as it does regulatory protest. Costs between the two series being broadly comparable, IMSA apparently delivers a more firm foothold in the North American market at a time when Porsche's road car business is under pressure. Whether they ultimately stay solely in IMSA, return to the WEC, or scale back further remains to be seen. But the likelihood of the move being fully down to cost in WEC is surprising, since I've written before about how Porsche's racing costs could have been mitigated. Viewed through this lens, Porsche's exit is a positive indicator insofar as they left because of internal issues. What I mean by that is that at present, this decision is neither the canary in a coal mine for the spiraling costs that have doomed other series, nor an indictment of the WEC's value proposition. Regardless, their exit now forces the FIA, ACO, and IMSA to accelerate conversations about BOP and the long-term convergence of LMH and LMDH. Now, to be clear though, the need for conversation is not an indictment of the BOP, because Porsche aside, the BOP works, but the key qualifier is that it works for now. Now, I'm on record as saying that I have no real issues with BOP. It's necessary, but that's not really what's at the root of a series' health. It's required. I think we can talk about that at some other point, but it's not the root. So I've spoken about cost control, and manufacturers need cost control once they've committed to racing. But before anything else, a series must attract teams. So to be sustainable, a motorsport series has to do two things. It has to be established in such a way as to encourage brands and teams to join, and it has to be established in such a way as to then keep them around. And usually costs are a very important part of that. So if the series can attract teams, grids will be full, racing will be engaging, and fans will follow. Conversely, weak manufacturer engagement leads to weak racing, full stop. Regardless of online noise and what you're going to hear and read people say about the BOP, WC grids are packed. And despite Porsche's exit, and this is arguably due more to their own finances and regulations, Genesis, McLaren, and Ford will soon join the hypercar class. The only metric that ultimately matters is, are grids full of different cars? Right now, with the BOP in place, yes. But Porsche's exit may force endurance racing to confront questions it was hoping to avoid for several more years. Here's a phrase that I've come up with that I think really encapsulates my thoughts on a racing series as a platform. And that's that a racing series is actually a business model disguised as a rule set. Because the idea, of course, is to keep racing. And to do that, you have to make money. So a racing series is a business model disguised as a rule set. While hardcore fans say that only the racing matters, the reality is that a racing series must be financially sustainable. Now, passion is great, but it doesn't pay circuit fees, security, logistics, insurance, any of those things that are required to put together fun and safe races. The coexistence of the LMH and LMDH platforms was a really masterstroke in its early years. It kept costs down, allowed for manufacturer identity, and filled grids on both sides of the Atlantic. And that success is why the hypercar rules have already been extended to 2032, out from the original 2027 homologation period. But Porsche's withdrawal and manufacturers' occasional frustration, I think, will accelerate the convergence debate. And you've already seen that play out in some of the quotes given by executives at various teams. Now, will this actually matter to fans? Well, not directly. Most of us, myself included, just want fun racing. But from a commercial point of view, regulatory decisions are existential. Remember, I said that grids have to be full. That's the only metric that matters. So if the rule set alienates multiple marquee manufacturers, the entire ecosystem comes under strain. So it would appear that endurance racing's future course will be determined by the answers to two opposing questions. First, is there really a need to risk changing something that is working? Again, grids are full. And the second question is Porsche's exit from the WEC a one-off or the first crack in the facade? That aside, let's talk further commercial prospects and ask a question that I think is really natural, and it's natural for any motorsport series in the wake of Drive to Survive, and that is that given where the WEC and IMSA are now, do they need their own Drive to Survive? I've argued before that IMSA and the WEC are arguably the best platforms for manufacturers wishing to showcase racing DNA. A Ferrari 499P overtaking a Ferrari 296 GT3 is brand storytelling you cannot buy elsewhere or anywhere. It's a beautiful image just to think about it. Now that both series have full grids, justifiable costs, rising attendance, and multiple new manufacturers joining, is this the moment to go after F1 level mainstream visibility? It's a valid question, and my hypothesis on this is that no, it's not quite the time. Endurance racing is fundamentally more complex than F1. You have more drivers per car, multi-class traffic, race lengths ranging from a couple of hours to 24 hours, and a storytelling structure built around machinery, not personalities. And by that, what I mean is that the WEC and IMSA really are about the cars as characters rather than the drivers as characters. Now, growth is absolutely possible, but I don't know that it's necessary. If the WEC and IMSA turn a profit and teams are satisfied, the priority should be maintaining the on-track product and fan experience, then adapting if that growth materializes rather than chasing it as a primary goal. Now, speaking of growth, I want to turn to an engine of growth that I haven't really talked about here, and that's GT3, the financial engine of endurance racing. Granted, the stories around GT3 aren't perhaps as exciting as the ones around the hypercars and GTP, but you cannot mention endurance racing without mentioning GT3. So GT3, which I'm using, of course, as a catch-all for LMGT3 in the WEC, and then the various GTD categories in IMSA, often confuses newcomers, at least in the context of endurance racing, because a natural question is, why are there two races on the same track? But it's absolutely essential. GT3 cars look like what you can buy in the showroom, and that makes them a key form of brand outreach. And it's because of this that Mercedes-AMG's return to endurance racing in 2025 was one of the year's major stories in this particular class of racing. And for the series, GT3 grids are not just a nice to have, they are a financial backbone. The bronze drivers who populate much of the category keep the ecosystem healthy. Because of this reality, one emerging dynamic worth watching, only hypothetically, I'm just putting this out there, but that's the bronze driver pipeline itself. WEC and IMSA grids depend on these bronze drivers, and history has shown that it's the privateers that can pull series through lean times. The supply of capable amateur drivers with the means to race is large, sure, I'll give you that, but it's not infinite. And while this is only hypothetical at the point, it does represent a structural constraint on future financial viability if both top flight sports car series can't attract a maximum of LMGT3 and GTD entries. Now, it's hard to fathom. I understand that given how well things are going. But if GT3 cars and bronze drivers are so important to the series, it's always going to be worth watching that as a performance metric for both the WEC and IMSA. Again, though, in 2025, GT3 grids remain full, and early signs suggest 2026 will be no different, with Lamborghini's new Temerario being a highlight to watch. And costs will require attention as well, as they always will. If you're interested, I have recently put together an audit GT3 teams can perform on themselves to uncover savings as high as six figures, and I will link that in the show notes. So I want to close this out with the concluding statement here for 2025, which is that endurance racing is strong, but you can never rest on your laurels, and stewardship of the WEC and IMSA needs to remain careful. These series are doing really well. Their on-track product is excellent, their calendars are stable, their grids are full, and their growth is undeniable. They're positioned better than perhaps at any point in the last 2 decades. There's a reason we're calling this the platinum age of sports car racing. But as I see it, the future depends on 3 things. 1, safety for everyone at a race being top of mind. The drivers, of course, but fans also. Crowd safety is an enormous point of importance for me because I'd love to attend more races and feel safe as I do so. And I hope that there's a system in place to make sure that everyone stays safe and has fun at these races. Also, there needs to be behind the scenes technical governance navigating convergence wisely. I didn't get into it, but these questions of technical convergence are really important, not just commercially, but also technically. And if you look back at IndyCar, for instance, which is still struggling with issues, well, if you trace things back a couple of decades, a lot of that comes down to technical convergence. And finally, there needs to be commercial discipline ensuring sustainability rather than just chasing F1 style growth because that series happened to do it. F1 is F1, endurance racing is endurance racing, and let's just navigate things from there. Of course, we can't not come back to Porsche's exit, which could be an isolated case within the WEC, or maybe it's the early warning sign of deeper issues. I am more tending to think it's the former, but of course, I hope someone is watching and making sure it's not the latter. So, how rulemakers respond to this will determine whether endurance racing's shining moment becomes a permanent platinum era or a brief peak. Either way, endurance racing in 2025 proved something important. Not every form of motorsport needs to be F1 to be successful. It just needs to deliver excellence both on and off the track. Well, that is it for this first episode of the 4th season of Return on Racing. As usual, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. And if you liked these insights, I'd like to know if you could please sign up for the Return on Racing newsletter. This is a newsletter that delivers very quick insights to you once a week on Sunday. The idea is to give you actionable insights that you can apply directly to your motorsport operations as quickly as possible. If you're interested in signing up, please navigate to the Vaucher Analytics website. www.vaucheranalytics.com is the address, and the sign-up form is right there on the front page. I'll also provide a direct link to that sign-up form in the show notes for this particular episode. I want to thank you again for taking the time to join me here on Return on Racing, and I really look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.